probably the idea is very good. Even if the idea is very good, uh, your proposal, your idea may not stick, your proposal may fail. So it's very, very important to present ideas. Nevertheless, uh, many presentations fail to be effective. And this is the core of my talk today. Why does this happen? How can we avoid mistakes most people do when preparing or delivering a presentation? How to make an effective presentation? So this is what we are going to see today, and I hope you can at the end be fit for your next challenge, your next presentation. Okay, so let's do see an example of how to start a presentation. This presentation already started, and I'm going to talk about this later on how to start a presentation, how this started. Okay, but let's look at something that is typical in the when you're beginning a presentation, which is the table of contents. This is not the table of contents of this presentation, okay? But so let's have a look at this hypothetical table of contents. An upper class girl boards a big ship on her way to be married with a rich boy. Then the girl is not happy, although she's going to be married, and tries to commit suicide. Then there's a poor boy that sees her and saves her from committing suicide, and they fall in love. And then the rich boy gets jealous, and the big ship, after some problems, is sinking. The rich boy saves himself and doesn't think about his fiancée. The upper class girl and the poor boy fight for their lives, and they manage to at first to solve the problem, but then he is very tired and is in freezing waters and drowns himself, and she survives, but she never forgets him. So, okay, this rings a little bell. I think you heard this story. This in fact, is the story of the Titanic. Not that that's a film that I like particularly much. Okay, it's fine. But suppose that at the start of this film, you would see the table of contents. Nobody would want to look at the film. So why should you start by the table of contents? In fact, you should not start by the table of contents. Why? How can you start, and should you start a presentation? Well, you should start by the motivation. So we have a problem here. Uh, we want we know that many presentations fail. We are going to see how how to do an effective presentation. So this is then the promise that you make. Okay, you start with the motivation, and then you make a promise. And this is how to start a presentation, not the table of contents. Maybe you can, in one or two points, if you want, depending on the presentation, briefly touch two or three points that would be like an informal table of contents, but there's no need for providing a specific slide with the table of contents. So this is something that you should avoid, because it's much better to provide the motivation and to explain what the attendee will gain by listening to your presentation, the promise. Okay, another point is that, okay, many presentations have to do with the work that you are doing or have done. For instance, for PhD students, like many of the people that are listening today, after 3 or 4 years, you're going to present your PhD thesis to a jury. Okay, so you have this huge document of 200 pages, or sometimes more, sometimes less, but okay, and you want to put everything in the presentation. You have your master thesis, you have a report, you have a paper that you worked on this paper for 6 or 9 months, and you want to present everything that is in the paper. Okay, this is not a good approach, because a presentation is not a report. So this is something very important. you should not try to provide detailed factual information in a presentation. There's no need to explain everything in a presentation. There's no need for a structure like the report that is related to the presentation, or the document that is related to the presentation. This is something that most people, well, fail to understand, and try to put everything inside the presentation and forget that they should concentrate on the key points, on the key message that they want to transmit. So, and if this is not a report, a presentation, you should avoid things like this. Okay, you should never put something like this. This is something that, this wonderful table, I'm using this from a project, and I apologize if anyone from this project is here. I hope not. Okay, it's a very good product. I like being there. It's taken from a presentation of a project, but this is something that makes sense in a report, but it does not make sense in a presentation. Or something like this, which is similar, or even this and this. And this is actually a slide where you have three superimposed, very detailed information that no one can read. Okay, you're not giving, not explaining a report. You're doing a presentation. You're transmitting some ideas. So you should avoid to do this, because it's useless. Okay. Well, so what should we do? Okay, we have this intention of conveying an idea, or a limited set of ideas, 2 or 3 ideas at most, normally one idea. You have to pass a message to your audience. So what's the best way to do this? Well, tradition has it. Normally, a message is passed through a story, through legends, through books, through movies. Okay, we all of us have read books when we were many years ago, when we were still young, and we still remember those books. Why? Because there's a story underneath that book. Okay, so you should embed your message in a story. This is different from what people normally do, which is some people that talk about how to do a presentation. They say, "Oh, you should you should um, um, uh, crack some jokes, or tell a story that has nothing to do with your message." No, you should not tell stories. You should not crack jokes. This is a bad idea. You should transform the idea that you want to convey into something that is story-like. Okay, we have this problem, and we have these objectives. At first, we tried to explore this hypothesis. Then we encountered some problems. One of the problems was this. How did you overcome this problem? By doing this. But then we had another problem, and something came up unexpectedly. And how did we deal with this? Well, we dealt with this by doing this or that experiment. So the idea is to transform your message into a story-like thing. Okay. This is the most effective way of conveying an idea, because then the listener, the attendee of your talk will remember the various obstacles and the various ways that you explain on how to overcome those obstacles. So something that you should not do is, for instance, okay, put a Gantt chart. A Gantt chart can be looked at as a story. Okay, you start with WP1 and WP2 and WP2. This is boring. Okay, nobody wants to know about Gantt charts in a presentation. We should include this in a report, as I mentioned before. You should include this In a project that has there are some relations with work package and tasks and things like that, but not in a presentation, because this is not the way to do to tell a story. Okay, again, one, and stories have forms. One good way of telling a story would be by using a form like this one. We're going to talk later on about the forms of a story, but this is a good shape for a story where you have a situation here, a problem, and then you have to overcome this problem. So you have to increase your have to take some actions to solve this problem. Then at some point the problem is solved, and you can relax a little bit, and now you have overcome this obstacle. Okay, so this is an acceptable shape for a story. Uh, the important thing here is that you should um, call the attention of the audience to the interesting facts. And an obstacle is an interesting fact. The way to overcome the obstacle is an interesting fact. And then the result after overcoming the obstacle is also an interesting result. So the idea is to transform your work into something that is lively. Okay, there is something that is an interesting story to engage your audience. And this is the key word in your presentation. You should try to engage your audience as much as possible. And for doing this, of course, you have to first, you have to think about what's the purpose of your presentation. Is it a presentation to inform or to persuade the audience, or to inspire the audience, or to entertain the audience? This you should beforehand think about this and decide. Is my presentation going to be informative? Do I want to persuade the audience to engage on some course of action? Do I want to inspire them into exploring new ideas? Do I want simply to entertain, or do I want a mix of some of these things? This is also very important when you're planning a presentation. You should um, first uh, adapt your story according to the purpose of your presentation. And this will enable you to be enthusiastic, more or less, when you prepare your talk. And most of all, it optimizes the chances that the audience will be eager to know more, be eager to learn, to read your report, or to ask questions in the end. So this is very important. Of course, all of this depends on what? Depends on the audience. And you should, as much as possible, study your audience. I know that today most of us are PhD students, but okay, there can be other types of attendees here, but at least this is oriented to a PhD student. So this is why I talked about theses and talked about reports and talked about papers and things like that. If I were to do a presentation to the board of a company, I would not choose an entertaining presentation. They would say, "Oh, I don't want to go to the theater. I want facts. I want numbers. I want you to inform me about the way your project is being is running. Is it achieving so the goals or not?" So they want numbers. They want facts. They want figures. So this would be an informative presentation. But if I want to convince the boss, the president of a company, that he should invest some money in a project that may give some profits in 2 years or in 3 years, I must persuade him or her to do that. So this would be a different type of presentation. We should uh, adapt the purpose of the presentation to the audience. Okay, and this is extremely important, and sometimes people fail to do this. One other aspect, of course, is I've mentioned this already, is that we want to convey a given idea or a limited set of ideas. And sometimes in many presentations, this is not clear because the speaker has either a very fuzzy objective or a set of sub-objectives, and this is not clear. So if this is not clear for the presenter, it's much less clear for the audience. And this is one problem. Okay, we should first of all clearly identify the object, the objective of the presentation. I'm going to give a presentation, and what's my objective is to explain how to do a presentation, or this is the case today, but or is it's to explain my the gist, the core of my PhD proposal. Okay, I want to do a PhD on this topic, and I must demonstrate that this topic is timely, is topical, and the solutions that exist still leave some room for improvement, etc., etc. So, but the objective must be very clear, and sometimes the way to reach this objective is not clear at all. Okay, so we don't have well-defined objectives, and we start talking about this and that and that, and there's no clear path to reach these objectives. This is the worst thing that can happen in a presentation. You should clearly identify one objective or two or maximum three objectives, sub-objectives, so related sub-objectives, and we should define the message that you want to convey and choose a structure that is effective, a story that leads us from the beginning to the end without without erratic behavior. Okay, and when we reach the end, we should reinforce the message that you want to pass in the end by connecting the objectives with at the end with what you stated at the beginning. So this is also very important. This is not in this figure, but sometimes it's important to refer back to the objectives, to the motivation. Okay, you had this motivation. We wanted to address this problem, and then you have the results, and you just make you close the cycle by saying, okay, these results are in accordance with our objectives, and prove that we were right at the beginning, or they don't prove it, or they simply arise from all that the work that we did. Okay, that's good. So for doing this, you should choose a structure, and of course, a typical structure is this one. Nothing wrong about this: introduction, then the body of your presentation, and then the conclusion. The issue here is that there is no need for an explicit introduction, no need for an explicit body and an explicit conclusion. This is, you should lead the audience to this. Okay, the introduction, of course, is the problem, is the motivation, is the empowerment promise that you did at the beginning. We are going to see how to do this. Okay, so we have this problem, and we are going to see how to solve it. Okay, this is your introduction, as simple as this. And then, of course, the body is the succession of partial obstacles and partial solutions that are going to explain in order to reach your well-defined objective. Okay, it's the path, and this path should be as direct and as clear as possible. And then the conclusion. Well, the conclusion is what? Uh, it's the contributions. Okay, it's the result of your work. It's the new solutions that you develop. Okay, so this is the conclusion. We're going to talk a little bit now, a little bit more about introduction, body, and conclusion later on in some minutes. But anyway, the structure uh, is basically this, although it can have some shapes, and we have seen already one of these shapes when you choose uh, inside this overall structure, introduction, body, and conclusion, you choose a shape for your talk. You're opting between something like this. We already seen this is a good shape where you have an obstacle and you must must and we eventually you will overcome through a solution. This is a good shape. There are other shapes. For instance, this one is called the hurdle. Okay, you have an obstacle. This one is called the explanation, where you explain how your work progressed and how you were simply approaching, solving the obstacles and approaching the solution. It's also, I would say that it's more or almost equivalent to the previous one. This is called the drama. Okay, some people call this the drama. You were quite well, and then suddenly things started just breaking. Everything started to fail, and you had a problem here, and then you tried to develop solutions to overcome this problem, and hopefully you even ended up much better than when you were at the beginning. Okay, so this is called the complication. Okay, there's some complication, and then you develop the solution for this complication, and this is the opportunity where you nothing was wrong with your situation, but then you saw an opportunity to improve, so you worked a little bit in order to reach a better solution, and then you reach this better solution. So this is the opportunity. If you look at all these, they all fall into the same category, and this category was in fact mentioned by not by me, but by a very well-known presenter called Nancy Duarte, American presenter. She's a communication expert, and she has several books on communication. And she says, and I agree, that the best shape for a presentation is this one. Okay, what's this one? It's where you start by identifying a problem and then a possible solution. And then you start, you keep on oscillating between a negative view and a positive view. This is a sub problem, and the way we overcome this sub problem. Then another one appeared, and then you finally reach a solution for it. And it goes on and goes on, and then at the end you have what you hope for, the new solution that solves everything. And if you look at good presentations, if you look at books, if you look at films, whenever you're telling a story, they all obey this shape. It's funny, but it's true. If you take Steve Jobs' presentation of the iPhone, it takes this shape. If you take many other presentations, it takes this shape. If you look at the well-known film that we mentioned that at the beginning, the Titanic, and if you look at the film, it also fits this presentation. First, okay, this girl, she had no money, so she tried to solve this, and her mother arranged a marriage with a rich boy. Okay, she had a problem, and then now everything is solved. But then she boarded the ship and then she was not happy. Okay, negative. And she decided to commit suicide. When she was trying to commit suicide, a poor boy saved her. Okay, that's the positive thing. And they fell in love. Everything was good. Everything was wonderful. But then the ship started sinking, and then they tried to save themselves. At first, they did not know where they were. Then they found each other. That's a good thing. Okay, then they were trying to get out of the ship. That was the negative thing. Then they found some wreckage to grab onto. That's a good thing. But then he drowned and etc. So if you look at the film, you see negative, positive, negative, and this is the way that you should also do your presentation to keep the attention of the audience. And at the end, you should try to map this presentation to this form, and you'll see that it also matches. Okay. So now, once you have decided, you have planned your presentation, okay, you can start preparing it. Okay, and the plan takes all these things that we have done before: identifying an object or limited set of objects, choosing a structure, and then choosing a shape for your story, identifying a story, things like that. Okay, that's good. And now you start. Once you have decided this, you have to decide on the slides. Okay, if you use slides, because some people don't use slides. Okay, but let's assume that most of us are going to use slides. And here's an example of an excellent slide. Again, I'm using a slide from a project that I like very much, this project, but the slides are not very good. And you look at this slide and you say, oh, there's lots of things here. How can someone in some seconds uh, take in all this information? So first, let's try to get rid of something. Okay, what's the background doing here? Nothing. It adds nothing, just noise. What about these squares, rectangulars, and things that have nothing to do with the message that you want to convey? Nothing. Take them out. What about the the footer, the date, the name of the presenter, the logos that in the slide? Okay, if you're going to a presentation, you know the date, you know the person, you know who he or she is working for. So let's take this out. If you're trying to convey a message, why do you keep all this graphical material here in the slide that adds nothing to it? Just remove it. What about all this text that is here and nobody can read in the time you're talking about the slide? Take it out. Uh, and what about the title? What's the title doing there? Because if you're speaking, if you're talking about a topic, and the people that are listening to you know what the topic is. So you should also get rid of the title. And what about this diagram here? Well, it's too complicated. Maybe you should get rid of it. And we have a wonderful slide. Okay, no, not that. No, I'm not going to exaggerate, but why not have a simple diagram, a simple structure for the idea that you want to convey with this particular slide? You have a module that has some submodules, and that there are some interconnection between these modules. I think this is enough for one slide. Okay. Um, so we're going almost okay. We're going back to our introduction, and one thing is that happens quite frequently is that some introductions are too long. Okay, and I've seen introductions that have as much as 15 slides. This is going to be long, as I've written here, and you should avoid this. Why? Because if you don't have a clear objective, if you don't have a simple message, and you have to present it in 15 slides, This is not an introduction. This is not a presentation with a clear objective, and you should rethink all what you're doing. So basically, avoid this problem. If the body of your presentation has too many slides, this means that you are trying to explain every little detail of the underlying document, your thesis, your report, your paper. So again, you should avoid this because there's no clear. This means that there's no clear objective. There is no clear message. This is tiresome also, and the same with the conclusion. Why should you have conclusions that sometimes take 15 minutes to go through with lots and lots of slides? People probably are already late, are thinking of going out of the next meeting that they have to go to. So nobody is listening to you. And so basically, the conclusions should be as simple as possible. And how simple? They should be centered on the contributions. The conclusion is simply the contributions that came out of your work. And these contributions are directly connected to the promise that you made at the beginning and nothing else. Of course, some people also, and it's possible to do this, to include some future work. Okay, it's not only the contribution, it's the future work. I would not recommend to put future work, and maybe some of you are shocked, and I'm explain why. Because you should leave this for the questions. So, and if you end up with the future work, your the last impression that the attendee has is centered on the future work, not on the contribution. And this is not what you want. You want to convey an idea, and the idea, the central idea, is your contributions. And you should link the contributions with your promise at the beginning, establish the connection between what you have achieved and what you promised to achieve. And they should match, of course. You should close the loop. Once again, this is very important, okay, to close the loop. Uh, and you should end with this because this is the climax of your presentation. If you after that talk about future work, uh, it's fine, of course. All work should have future work perspectives, but you should leave this out just to not to steal strength of your contributions, and you should leave this for the questions, because someone will ask you, oh, but have you stopped this, or why didn't you explore this? Yes, we intend to explore this in our later work, etc., etc., etc. One other thing is that an acknowledgement. Sometimes people do acknowledgements at the end, and I would advise you to do the acknowledgement not at the end, because again, for the same reason, you want to end the presentation with your contributions, not with the acknowledgement. And where should you acknowledge the work by others? At the beginning, okay? Probably at the very beginning, before even you do the motivation, you should say, okay, the work that I'm going to present has the cooperation of these colleagues of mine, and I would like to acknowledge the support of this project. And then you start talking about the motivations and the problem and the promises. Okay, so you should do it at the beginning. And then the last slide. Some people like this last slide. I don't like it. I think you should not. It should be obvious that you're going to finish the presentation. So if you put this slide, the very last thought that people have, it's not the contributions, it's the end. So I would not put it. For the same reasons, I would not put questions, the slide with questions. And I also would not put a slide with thank you or obrigado in Portuguese. Not that you cannot say this. You can say this. there's no problem in saying this, but putting a slide with this, it's just a way to divert the attention of the audience to you from your final message. Once you have prepared your slides, then you have to do what? Take care with the timing, which is something that I should also do in my presentation. I still have five minutes because these presentations are long, 45 minutes. And you should rehearse, rehearse, rehearse. Okay, this is very important. Don't go well beyond your timing, and rehearse your presentation as much as possible. And when you're doing your presentation, avoid some errors, like some of them are in here. One of them, here we have several errors. Some of them, we talked about them. I must confess that I took this picture on purpose. I asked the person to do these errors, and it's someone from our department, and he was conscious that I was going to use this as a bad example. I explained him the situation. Okay, so first one is that the presenter has the back turned to the audience. You should not do this. Then you should not point to the text or even use a laser pointer, because for the same reason to use the laser pointing, you have to turn your back to the audience. So if you want to highlight something in the slide, you do just a circle or an arrow or something like that in your presentation. It's much better. You should not read text. And if you have text that people are not able to read, you should avoid this also, but you should not read the text that's there on the slides. There are too many ideas in here, of course. We have already seen this. And another error is that you should not do your presentation in subdued or with no light at all. This room is dark. You should not do this. Why? Because then some people will fall asleep, others will start doing things that have nothing to do, because nobody is seeing them, so they're just checking the mail or doing whatever. So you should be able to see the audience as the audience is able to see you, in order to engage your audience as much as possible. Okay, so we are drawing to a close, and let me summarize our contributions. Okay, and the first thing that we should consider when doing a presentation is that we must plan it. And what does this mean? This means defining a clear objective for the presentation, or a clear set of limited objectives. Define the message that you want to convey, build a story in order to convey this message, and choose a structure, an overall structure for your talk. This is very, very important. The planning phase is extremely important. And then when you have this, you can start preparing your presentation. And probably the first stage of this preparation is to know the audience. Okay, who are the audience of this presentation? Why am I going to do this for these people here? And then you have to adapt your strategy to the audience. You have to choose a strategy. Is this to inspire, to inform, to persuade, to entertain? And then you have to do some adaptation uh, of your strategy to the audience. And of course, you must take care with your slides. You must optimize the slides as little as possible in order to convey the message. Don't put slides just because you want to have many slides. So optimize in this case is minimize. Okay, minimize your slides, introduction, body, and presentation, but always minimal, and rehearse, rehearse, and rehearse. Once you have done this, you should be ready to present. And the presentation is the final step. You should be a little bit enthusiastic about what you're saying. So you should have confidence in your planning. You should have confidence in your preparation. and basically that's it. So we end up with exactly the same thing as the title. The title is Plan, Prepare, Present, and now you understand why I chose this title, because these are the 3 steps for an effective presentation. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you, Professor Boavida.